blogs and commentary. I'm going to read you a note that I got from a lady. We're going to bring in Gary Dierenfeld, social worker, to talk about this. And I had my kids a little later in life, so I can see differences when I meet with my kids' friends' parents. I'm a couple of years older than them, and I can see the difference in parenting just in that couple of years gap. Even a 5-year gap. And, I've had many discussions on the show about discipline. And to me, it's hard. It's not hard. It just takes time. It's tedious and it's monotonous, but it has to be done. This lady writes a note. I recall when you had a segment regarding arrogant people and their dogs. I had to write you about what occurred to me this past Thursday. It's not about a dog. My wife and I were shopping at Fortino's. We had purchased our groceries. We're at the checkout. My wife left for a sec to pick up an item. Right behind us was a woman and her child who was sitting in the buggy. The mother left him for a second. As I was unloading the groceries from our buggy onto the checkout, all of a sudden I heard this young lad talking aloud. I heard him calling me a dummy. I never paid any attention to this lad. The second time again, he was calling me a dummy. I turned around and was about to say something. He never let up. He called me a dumbass and continued calling him a dummy. The mother returned. I confronted the kid's mother and asked her what she's teaching her kid of calling strangers dummies. She didn't know what to say. She lectured the kid. He cried but never apologized. The kid's mother did apologize for him. She left to another checkout. The kid was around 8 or 9 years old. I was with a group of parents last week, and we were chatting about this. And, some were talking about friends or kids or whatever who, kid just, riding bikes on the lawn and running through the garden. Just please stop running through my garden, said the parent. And the kid just kept doing it, not because they were trying to be defiant. It's just they hadn't really been disciplined before. Another scenario where the kids are going back to school, the mothers and the fathers are talking about who the kids have for teachers, and, with this one situation, the kid gets a teacher and somebody says, wow, that teacher's a real disciplinary. To what the parent says, well, that's good, he needs discipline. I've had a scenario where somebody has said to me, well, you tell him, he'll listen to you. Well, if he'll listen to me, why won't he listen to you? If the child needs discipline, and it's good that he's got a teacher because that's a disciplinary because it'll teach him, he needs discipline. Well, why doesn't the parent just give him the discipline? Why are we waiting for other people to discipline our kids? And yes, it's tedious. Yes, you have to do it time and 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 time again. Get your feet off the table, get your feet off the table, get your feet off the table, get your feet off the table. And then sooner or later they get it. But this happened, I see it happen time and time and time again. And I am convinced it is simply because parents do not take the time to discipline their kids. And then they're worried when they're disciplining their kids, they're being bullies. Or that they're being negative. Or that they're being whatever. I don't get it. And as a result, we get scenarios like this. Joining us now, Gary Dierenfeld, social worker, and of course, yoursocialworker.com to find out more. He's with us now. Good afternoon, Gary. How are you today?
I'm good, and boy, do we sing from the same song sheet.
I see this all the time, Gary. I see this all the time. And I know when I'm saying and I'm disciplining my kids, I'm sounding a lot like my parents. But again, I've had educators say to me, well, if we don't do this, we'll be harping at them all the time. To which my response was, well, that's the job. That's what you have to do, unfortunately. If they did it the first time, we wouldn't need parents.
I know. You're on a bit of a rant, but the truth is I share your rant. I wrote in my blog, good luck finding it online, but I guess if you write Gary Dierenfeld blog, maybe you'll find it. This blog post was talking about parenting guts, that we don't seem to have parenting guts anymore. A kid goes, wah, and the parent caves.
Yeah.
And then as the parent caves, the child is emboldened, and, this is the one that goes from dummy to dumbass, and you're like gobsmacked. I love that British term, by the way. But we're gobsmacked. How can this kid get away with such insolence? And it evokes a visceral response where you want to cuff them upside the head in the absence of the parent doing so.
No different than the video we're all watching of the mall scenario with the BMX bikers.
And so when you take that 9-year-old who, the letter writer had written about, and, child development, it follows a trajectory. If I take an arrow and a bow, I pull it back, I release it, that arrow has a trajectory. That 9-year-old has a trajectory. And if at 9 years of age that kid isn't being helped, made, cajoled to apologize to the adult, this is the kind of behavior we're going to see come 18 to 20 years of age.
You bring up a valid point here, Gary. The note explains the mother apologized, obviously embarrassed, went to another checkout. Should she have made the child apologize?
Absolutely, the mother should have made the child apologize. That child understands that they are going to have to take responsibility for their behavior, not kind of sheepishly avoid behind their mother's skirt to come back another day and do the same. And so I'm not condoning battering our kids or being abusive or hitting, even though I'm on the same rant as you. What I am saying is that when your child misbehaves, even if it's a 2, 3-year-old, we help them to say, I'm sorry. This is to take responsibility and repair relationships.
So at the end of the day, swearing kid, if not tended to, will become mall problem kid, won't he?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we have here. We have, this mall situation is that 9-year-old on steroids 10 years later. And these are, they wind up being disenfranchised kids. They don't have the appropriate social skills. They're getting into trouble with other like-minded kids, and you can see that in your video. It's quite classic. And now they're engaging in violent criminal behavior where the consequence is that much more dire for everyone.
And you know what we're going to hear, Gary, and I'm going to get them soon, and I bet you, and my producer's answering calls now. Well, you know what it is? The teachers and the parents can't discipline the kids anymore, which equals, in their mind, I can't hit my kid.
Right.
What is it? So do we have to beat our kids in order to get well-behaved kids?
And so, no one like myself, no child behavior expert is ever saying to hit your kid. But not being able to hit one child doesn't mean that we don't hold them accountable and still have consequences and teach discipline. So you don't need to hit your kid for misbehaving, but you can take them by the hand and you say, come with me, you're going to apologize. And you hold them accountable to that, not in a draconian, abusive power and control way, but in a way that says, sweetheart, that's not acceptable. We don't do that to people. When you do that, you've hurt their feelings. We wouldn't want anyone hurting your feelings in that way. Now let's make everyone feel better. Apologize.
Now, some may say, Gary, you're living in some sort of rosy world. What if the kid just keeps screaming and screaming and screaming? But you know as well as I do, this starts at the very beginning and it keeps continuing so you don't get to that point.
Yeah, well, that's what bedrooms are invented for. So we can say to that child, you know what, you're out of control. You're not ready to listen. So to help you get yourself ready to listen, you're going to have to spend some time in your bedroom until you've gained your composure and you're ready to behave appropriately. And whether we call it time out, time in your bedroom, whatnot, these are more appropriate means of dealing with the child's behavior as opposed to us inadvertently role modeling violent behavior, the very behavior we're trying to get rid of. That's why we don't hit our kids, by the way, because every time we do, all we're doing is role modeling power control and violence. So while it looks like we're gaining compliance, we're teaching the wrong thing and likely gaining ongoing resentment.
Again, I can think of an example, because I'm a bit of a disciplinary. He'll listen to you. Boys will be boys. He'll listen to you. He's getting a teacher who's pretty tough. That's good. He needs discipline. Why are these parents looking to other people to discipline? Why is this parent looking to me to discipline their kid? Why are they looking to the teacher to discipline the kid? Why can't they do it if they expect us to do it?
Unfortunately, that's a sad cop-out, because the child is going to learn that their primary caregiver, their parent, has no sway, no influence over their behavior. So we want parents to manage these things firsthand, because that's where kids really, really learn, where self-control, discipline, listening, how to get along with others. Many parents, they're inadvertently what we call permissive parents. And when I use the word permissive, it doesn't mean that they're out to let their kids get away with this stuff, but inadvertently they do let their kids get away with this stuff because they never hold their child accountable. So the parent that apologized on behalf of the 9-year-old, not trying to be permissive, but inadvertently is, because what that parent didn't do was have her own child apologize on that child's behalf.
And, what I've found, too, in many situations is it's not necessarily a bad kid, because when you say something, the kid looks at you as if it's the deer in the headlights of a car. It's just that they haven't been taught that. It's just that they haven't been said. When somebody says to you, don't do something, make a mental note of that and try not to do it. Don't do it again. And keep doing it over and over again. It's
very powerful to sit down with a child like that and say, I don't know if you realize that, but when you talk that way, it causes me to see you in a bad light, and what a shame that is, because I'm sure you're a nice kid, and why would we want anyone thinking poorly about you? And so you want to make connections to help that child understand, appreciate the impact of their behavior upon others, and also how in the long run it doesn't really serve their needs too.
Getting to the mall video with the BMX bikers that were told to remove their bike from Jackson Square, and then didn't do so, and as a result, a brawl breaks out between security guards and so on. There's now 2 arrests have been made, an 18 and a 24-year-old, not kids by any means. But I think what amazes me at first, and we've talked about this before many times, is that people will participate in criminal activity and then put it on video or post it somewhere in order to get recognition for it, when all it does is leads to their quicker arrest. Again, I think this is 2 separate issues, and what that point fails to understand is that these kids don't think and coming back to what I was saying before about never being taught, these kids don't feel what they were doing is wrong. They felt that they feel that this is public property and they're entitled to be there, whether they're breaking or living by the rules or not. And they're so entitled that they're willing to put the proof of that up on a social media platform to let others see, only to have it backlash against them and go, you guys are knobs.
Yeah. So we do need, in these situations, we do need police involvement. We do need charges laid. And we actually do need convictions. When kids are so out of control, when they haven't met with authority, when they haven't internalized appropriate societal norms, they finally need to come up with some structures that say, you know what, you stepped outside the bounds, now you're going to have to pay for that. That is the only time we have a hope in teaching these kids where the limits are. Now, having said that, some of these kids are already so dysfunctional, the result of all these processes, that they will not get it, they do not get it. That sense of entitlement is enshrined in their being, and they hold these instances out like badges of honor versus disrespect.
And does that say, going back to my initial point, that they just were never taught this? They were never taught that you have to abide by certain rules, or you're going to make life more difficult for yourself. You don't have to. You can go the route of making life more difficult for yourself, but at the end of the day, you might not be at the place you want to be.
Yeah, so it does go back to that, and hopefully through the being charged, through being on bail, and then, whatever the sentencing is, hopefully that there'll be some sort of mechanism in place to not rehabilitate, because they were likely never so great to begin with, but to habilitate these young persons so that they'll be more socially responsible.
We often talk about the bad sides of social media, but this certainly seems like the pendulum swinging back. It can be a great neutralizer as well, can't it? It can be a great educator.
Oh, my goodness. I'm sure some good defense attorney will make some stink for what we didn't see on camera, but what we did see on camera was, from my perspective, the security fellows really showing remarkable restraint in the face of severe provocation and then assault.
And what about once we do further investigation, we find that there's a social media page, that there's a history of this? Again, further proof, further digging of your own hole, I guess. But what does that say about the raising of this individual and how, maybe that generation, there's things we got to tend to? There's things we've done wrong.
Well, clearly, this is a child's development that has gone awry. This is not something that started last week, last year. These kinds of issues are typically lifelong. And you know what? This is why I harp on why we need to help those who are in poverty, why we need to help disenfranchised, why we need to have parent education in place, why we need to have community resources for children and young persons where they can learn how to get along with others, get their needs met, and engage in healthy social activities. So yes, from a parental perspective, something has gone awry here, but also at larger levels, Scott, from a community and social policy perspective, we need to be doing better too.
Gary Dierenfeld has been with us, social worker. You can find out more at yoursocialworker.com and, of course, read his parenting column in your Hamilton Spectator. Gary, thanks for the time and insight. As always, much appreciated.
Take care, man.
You too.